All right, welcome, students. Welcome, students. Today we are going to speak about the topic that is over there, right here. It says sexual health. Okay. Um, the last time, if you see, I gave you a movie. It was very interesting. It was called Allison's Choice. I really enjoyed that movie and I've learned a lot. Yes, even I can learn a lot from movies like that. It was very educative. Now, after sharing that movie with you, I gave you some activities from the book and basically all the theory about sexual education and human health and human reproduction. All that information is condensed in the following activities because it's something that you already know a lot of information. Now, I really wanted to change the methodology and not only sharing a Zoom class. This time, I want to record a video explaining the parts that are considered as taboos in the sexual education. I'm going to explain a lot of different things that maybe you have doubts about it. For example, just to give you a clear example of all the things that we are going to share today. Right now, I'm not reading the script. I'm not reading a script. I'm just explaining by myself. Then, when we start the video definition, I'm going to follow a slideshow. But right now, I just want to tell you that, for example, we are going to cover topics that are sometimes a little bit hard to cover, and sometimes parents cannot share those topics with you because of our culture, right? We belong to a culture in Central America that is it's not so open like other cultures, right? And it's hard to speak sometimes about the homosexuality and speak about the paraphilies because there are a lot of different sexual definitions that we are going to speak about them today. Okay, so our topic, sexual health, is going to focus basically in that. We are going to speak about the importance of different things that happen in your life since you are babies until you reach the adulthood. Okay, and even we are going to speak about the diseases and problems that come after the adulthood when you reach the elderly age, right? So I don't want to speak anymore. It's time to start. So let's go. I'm going to share now my desktop so you can see what are we speaking about. We are going to share this topic about the sexual health, right? Now, now that we are right here, let me tell you that sexuality it's an integral part of the human, right? It's integral. It's part of all what we call humanity. Okay, we are body, we are mind, we are spirit, but each one of those parts are compound of different things. For example, our mind is compounded by all the reasonings, the reasonable thinking that we have. Our body is compounded of all the organs, feelings, and senses that are right here inside us. So the sexuality is part of a normal person. So sexuality is something normal. Now, love, affection, and sexual intimacy they contribute to a healthy relationship and to the individual well-being. That is important. Love and affection. The sexual intimacy is part of the adulthood. When you reach certain age and you get married, because you are just teenagers now, it's not recommended, but we know that sometimes that's happening according to cultures and according to different countries. They are doing that. They are getting married sometimes when they are just teenagers. But the correct way, the best way, I can say that, is when you are completely developed in your mind, in your body, and in your social aspects. But that's just my personal opinion. Let's continue speaking about this. Along with the positive aspects of our human sexuality, there are also illnesses, mixed emotions, and unintended consequences that can affect our sexual health. There are a lot of different things that are influences over our sexual health, over our identities that we have of ourselves in the sexual point. Good. Now, moving to the next one, we are going to make a definition about sexuality. Basically, sexuality is the sum of the total of our sexual feelings and behavior. It is shaped from our values, attitudes, behavior, physical appearance, beliefs, emotions, personality, likes and dislikes, as well as the way in which we have been socialized. So, depending in which kind of society you are, depending in the physical appearance, depending in the religious beliefs, because they are an important part of ourselves, depending in our emotions, how do we feel in that moment of our life, according our personality, all that give a frame for their sexuality. Okay, so sometimes the people think that sexuality is the same in all the world. No, it's different according the time, according the ages, and according the society. Everything is going to change in different ways. Good. Uh, for example, you cannot say that the sexuality from ancient China in the year 2000 before Christ is the same that we have in the modern times. It changes according to time. The sexuality, the definitions about sexuality, they change with the society. Now, the sexual health, the integration of the physical, emotional, intellectual, and social aspects of the sexual being in way that positively enhance and that personality, communication, pleasure, relationships, and love. Not merely the absence of disease, dysfunction, or infirmity. That is a definition by the World Health Organization. But I can say that the sexual health is the sum of all the elements that speak about the sexuality that help you to understand how important is that part of yourself. Now, the importance of sexual health, well, it's very important to have it because when a person don't have a correct sexual health, that gives you the possibility of being irresponsible. Okay, the irresponsible sexual behavior causes different problems: STDs, sexual transmitted diseases, even sometimes the pregnancy during the teenagers time. Imagine that. Just there's a lot of teenagers with 15, 14 years and they are with babies, and that is very complex in the situation that we have. The world is really hard, the society is really hard, and the economy is not so good for trying to take to this world a baby when you are just a teenager and you don't have a work or the economy to take care and supply all the needs of that baby plus the needs that you have as a teenager. So for that reason, we think that there are ages or levels for each person to have that different situation in your life. Having babies is not something that can be included inside a teenager. It's better to wait a little bit more time until the adulthood, until you have a better level in your mind, in your economical part. Okay. Well, in United States, they said that promoting the responsible sexual behavior is one of the most important health indicators for United States. United States worked hard, very hard, since 2001 and even before to change the sexual health and start to give this class, this subject in the schools so they can have a better education in their students. So in the future, they become citizens with more freedom about the sexual health. And it's important that we are going to compare United States health services and indicators with the ones that we have in Central America. We are going to do that later. Look at this phrase that says freedom from diseases that interfere with sexual and reproductive function. That is the main objective of the sexual health. Get freedom from diseases and other things that interfere with the sexual and reproductive function. The sexuality basically belongs to different levels: the biological level, the psychological level, the cultural level, social level, and legal level. Remember that we saw that in the book, that the sexuality belongs to different areas, to different levels. Okay, so having a sexuality is defined not only by the biological part. The sexuality is not only the definition if, okay, I am a male or I'm a female. No, that's just the biological part. Remember that we have the psychological part. We have the gender. The gender is another different thing. It's not like the sexual biological sex. There are differences between that. And we are going to speak about that later. Now, it's time to explain that. Understanding the sexuality. What's sex and what is gender? Well, um, in our country, we usually think that sex and gender are the same thing. Sexo y género pensamos que es lo mismo. No, it's not the same. Sex is one's biological characteristics, anatomical, physiological, and genetic, as female or male. Remember that biologically we have a sex, the one which we born, but our gender is not defined by that sex according to science. According to science and psychology, the gender is what a person, society, or legal system defines as female or male. Okay? Biologically, a person just, it can be only XX, XY, male, female, period. When we speak about genetics, when we speak about biology. But then, according to the society in which we live, they have genders. And remember that sex, we have only two. It's binary. Okay, the sex is male or female. The gender, in this case, is not binary. The society in which we live right now has more genders and more different kinds of sexual attractions. And that's what we are going to speak right now. Gender role is a set of socially or culturally defined attitudes, behaviors, expectations, and responsibilities that is considered appropriate for women, feminine, and men, masculine. The gender role is that what is considered appropriate for the male or the female. For example, in our culture, in Central America, in our culture, it's appropriate for a male to play with cars, to play with toys that are male toys, to play with hard and tough games like fighting, to have toys like superheroes, superheroes, or to play with guns. And well, that is expected, like that's the role for the male gender, and socially accepted for the female gender in our Central American culture. For female, play with dolls, with like with babies, play with toys of the kitchen, cooking. Okay, that's the gender role according our culture in Central America. Okay, now the in other countries is different. They have more freedom in the gender role. A boy can play with a doll, and that's not going to define if his gender is this or this one. A girl can play soccer, or she can play with superheroes toys, or she can play with hard games like wrestling or fighting or running, jumping, and that's not going to define her gender. Okay, in other countries, but in our Central American culture is different. Now, the gender identity, what is that? It is how one chooses to view oneself as male or female in integration with others. The gender identity is now when a person looks by herself or himself as a male or a female or other genders. We are going to speak about that later. Okay, that is the personal vision, the personal view that you have from yourself. Okay, for example, me, Mr. Salmeron, me, I am a man. That's as I see myself like a man. Then, how the other people look to me, that's the gender role. How I look to myself, that's the gender identity. Okay, and remember that that's different. For example, there are people that they are homosexual and they see themselves like, for example, there are men. We as a society, we look them as a man. Maybe the biological sex in that person is man, but that person look herself like a girl. In that case, we are speaking about the gender identity. Okay? Now, the sexual orientation. And now this is going to be a little bit complex, okay? I'm in this moment, I'm open to questions. You can go over there to the comments area in this YouTube video and write the questions that you have about the sexual orientation, okay? If you have any question about the sexual orientation, write the question over here in the comments area and I'm going to answer, okay? Let's start. Heterosexuality. That's the romantic attraction for sharing sexual expression with the opposite sex. The heterosexuality is what is commonly accepted in our countries, in Latin America. Heterosexuality is the normal standard for us in sexual orientation. For example, I am married with a woman because I I feel attracted for the women. I love them. I love women. So I decided to get married with a woman. It means that I am heterosexual. But then we have the homosexuality. The homosexuality is sharing the sexual expression with one's own sex. Okay? And it's divided into parts, gay or lesbian. When you see a man, a biological man, and that person identifies herself, and the gender role of that person is man, and the as we spoke later, the not only that, the gender role and the gender identity is a man, that person feels attracted for another man, they are homosexual. Okay, both of them. And when we speak about man, it's called gay. When the case happens with girls, it's called lesbian. Okay, when a woman feels attracted sexually for another woman, that is lesbianism. Then we have the bisexuality, that's sharing sexual expression with both sexes. That is something that very common in a lot of continents like Europe. In America is very common now, is being widely accepted as the homosexuality. Even there is a group called LGBTI, and it's expanding with more letters. That means lesbians, gays, bisexual, transsexual, intersexual, and they are adding more letters because there are more definition, more sexual orientations that they are adding to their organization. So the bisexuality is like that, the sexual attraction of both sexes. Like a man can feel attraction for another man or at the same time for a girl. Well, now the terminology that we have in the sexuality is wide. We are not going to cover all, but at least we are going to cover the most important parts. Well, some words or some terms that are very used and you need to understand are sexual arousal, that is the state of coital readiness brought on by a variety of stimuli. Masturbation. The word masturbation means the sexual stimulation by self. Uh, the masturbation can be female or male. Okay, both sexes perform masturbation, and is that the stimulation, the sexual stimulation of the organs, of the sexual organs by the same person, the or by another person. The oral sex is the stimulation of genitals with mouth in the case of male or in the case of female. The mouth of the couple is in contact with the sexual organ of the other couple. Then anal sex, that means the sexual stimulation of anus. Again, it could be oral or it could be with hands or with sexual toys. Petting is a sexual activity other than intercourse. Petting, this refers to other activities, not only the sexual intercourse. The sexual intercourse is the introduction of the penis in the vagina. That is the sexual intercourse. But petting are other activities that can be done with toys or with hands, with fingers, or even in the oral sex. Pornography. Pornography refers to the depiction of sex or sex organs in an erotic manner through audiovisual stimulation. Basically, pornography are videos or audios recorded in a way that they speak or show the sexual organs or to people or more people having sexual relations. That video stimulates the sexual part of the person that is watching it. Just a little tip, pornography can become addictive. Other terms are prostitution. Prostitution is the commercial sex. Prostitution is when a person decides to sell her or his body in exchange for money. Necrophilia. This is a paraphilia, okay? In psychology, the necrophilia is the sex between a living human and a human corpse. Yes, there's people that feel attracted by dead corpses and attracted in a sexual form. Incest is the sex between close relatives. For example, between brothers, sisters, parents, between cousins. That is called incest. Bestiality are the humans having sex with non-human animals. Bestiality is the sexual relation of a human with an animal like dogs, snakes, or other animals. Judaism is the sexual intercourse during a woman's menstrual period. That is something that is very dangerous because, well, we are going to speak about that later. I will show you that in the slideshow. The sexual development starts even before birth and continues throughout the lifespan. A variety of influences have an impact on this development. The genetic influences, the hormonal influences, and the psychological influences. Okay? Before birth, the human sexual response cycle begins. The male fetus achieves erections inside the uterus. Yes, inside the uterus, the babies can have this kind of erection, and they can born with an erection. Okay, the female sexual response cycle is functional before birth. Okay, so both the male and the female, both are active sexually in since they are inside the mother's womb. The sexual organs are starting to develop since that moment. So don't think that the sexual organs develop until uh, the adolescence. No, they start in the moment of the conception. Now, the development can take 6 months to 1 year. The genital self-exploration and masturbation occur for both sexes. Between 6 months and 1 year, the babies start to touch their areas. They start to explore the penis in the case of male. Girls start to explore their vaginas. They touch, they hit, they try to understand how are those organs. The masturbation, of course, the sexual stimulation. Remember that masturbation is the sexual stimulation. Now, maybe you are thinking that if the babies do it with the same mind that we can have as adults, no, of course, no. It's something that happened by nature in them. It's something natural. They touch because they are exploring and trying to know their body. When babies can touch their bodies, they begin to explore their genitals. They are exploring, trying to know all the areas, trying to understand the fingers, the hands, trying to understand the sensations. They touch their organs, they touch their legs, their stomach, they bite as they can, they chew as they can because they are exploring. At 2 years of age, the kids are aware of their biological sex. By the 2 years of age, they know if they are male or female. They have that idea in their minds. They show an understanding of sexual identity. They understand what is a sexual identity. They understand which are the boys, which are the girls. They understand. At 3 to 5 years of age, they understand how females and males should act as well as gender roles. Between 3 and 5 years, the kids already have an idea of the gender role, if they have to behave in one way or in another way. For example, according to the society that they live, they will know if it's appropriate to wear something. At 3, 5 years, a kid will understand by observing others that if it's a boy and he put on a dress, he's not going to feel good with the dress because he knows that dress in that culture are used by girls. So they are aware of that. They ask questions like where babies come from. Yeah, trust me, I have a daughter 5 years old and she already asked about that. And we have to explain her, not saying that the babies come from Mars or a bird brings the baby. No, we have to say the truth, but in words that are easy for her to understand. Between 5 and 12 years, they begin to show romantic interest. They first signs of the sexual orientation, the preference, if the preference is for males or females or both, if it's bisexual, it happens in that phase between 5 and 12 years. At ages 8 to 13 years, the first physical signs of puberty appears and begins slightly earlier for girls than boys. For that reason, most people say, I don't know if you remember that, but a lot of people say that no, females have a more developed brain than the male because they are aware before the male that they are girls. They are more mature. Okay, so you can say that. Good. The sexual development, as you see in the picture, the girls have the first menstruation between ages 9 and 16 years old. Okay? Don't think that it's a problem if it's too early at 9 years with the menstruation. That happens. Okay? It's important that the girl, when the first menstruation appears, go and speak with her mom or dad in the case that mom is absent. Go and speak about that change because there are a lot of things that they have to start to do to take care of their bodies. The first menstruation can appear at 9, 10, 11, 12, but sometimes it takes more time until 16 years. There's no problem about that. If it takes more time, there's no problem, but it certainly will appear. In case of not appearing, well, it's important to make a meeting with a doctor and speak about the situation. In the case of boys between 11 to 18 years, the sperms start to produce in the testicles. It takes a long period of time because it depends in the development of the boy. There are different bodies, there are different developments, so it's different for each one. In the case of boys, takes a long period of time between 11 and 18 years old. The sperm starts to develop and accumulate in more quantities. The pubertal milestones depend on the child's nutritional status and may be delayed if the nutritional status is compromised. Okay, the nutrition is important for the development of both boys and girls. The sexual development after the puberty. Well, the first sexual intercourse can appear between the puberty and the adolescence according to culture. It varies greatly by the culture. Mid to later adolescence is fairly common across cultures. The first childbirth, many factors determine when and whether a person has a first baby. The first childbirth also varies by community and individual. Okay, depending on the culture, depending on the community, there are communities where they have babies at 15 years, 16 years, but there are other countries in which the women can wait for 30 years, 35, 34 years, even 40 years to have their first baby. Okay? No, I think that both of the extremes are bad. They're not okay because having a baby too early will give you like a lot of economical problems depending on your situation. And having a baby after 40 years, uh, it can give dangers. There are dangers because having a baby for the first time until 40 years is mm, it's clinical proof that it has a lot of dangers for the women. It has a lot of risk factors. Well, and now we're going to speak about the menopause that it can happen in the female between the 30, 40, and 50 years old. It's very famous, the menopause. That is like a physiological change. They are at the end of ovulations, menstruation, and the capacity to reproduce. The menstruation happen in female, and they have a lot of changes because the ovulation stops. And if the ovulation and menstruation stops, it means that the hormones are going to change in her body. So a lot of things, a lot of behaviors, a lot of problems can start to appear between those ages. In the case of male, in Honduras, we call it andropausia. In our country, we call it like that. Well, in the male, it occurs between 45, 50, and 65 years of age. It causes the decrease in the testosterone production, and of course, the sexual attraction reduces a lot. The desire of sexual intercourse reduces a lot between those ages. It's not the same in ages 25, 35. It's not the same. It decreases a lot. Now, we are almost going to finish this video. The 5 stages of psychological development. Okay, we are going to speak about these 5 stages of the psychosexual development because we already spoke about the biological sexual development. Now it's time to speak about the psychosexual development. Okay, the libido. Libido, Freud's word for psychic and sexual energy. Okay, Sigmund Freud was one of the most famous psychologists of the history. Okay, but in each stage of development, there are frustrations, and if not successfully dealt with, the libido will be tied to that stage of development. Okay, when we spoke about the word libido, it's like that psychic or sexual energy, but in mind, that exists in mind. Well, we are going to speak about these stages in our sexual development, psychosexual development. Stage number one in the psychosexual development, according Sigmund Freud, the oral stage, from birth to 1 year old. The libido is focused on the mouth. Being fixated at this stage means an excessive use of oral stimulation, such as cigarettes, drinking, or eating. Okay, so if the stimulation uh, concentrates in this stage, the person will have more sexual attraction for oral activities. Then, between 2 to 3 years, the anal stage. The libido is focused anally. Being fixated at this stage can result in stubbornness, destructiveness, miserliness, and messiness. Okay, not so good. Then the third one, the phallic stage. In the phallic stage, this period is longer. It's between 3 to 6 years. It focuses of energy to genital area, and there are two complexes in this stage. Look, there are two stages. One is the Oedipus complex and the Electra complex. Aquí en estas edades se dan dos complejos: el complejo de Edipo, que se da en el varón, y el complejo de Electra se da en la mujer, en la niña. Okay, in the Oedipus complex that happen in male childs, they have they feel sexual desires for mother, and they see like the father is like a rival for the affections with his mom. The boy begins to fear like the father is going to punish him for that desire. That se le llama el complejo de Edipo debido a la historia, ¿verdad? De, de la Divina Comedia, de allá de Grecia, en donde Edipo, ¿verdad? Se enamoró de su madre y mató a su padre para poder estar con su madre. Es una historia de Grecia. Okay, that is the Oedipus complex. Okay, it's important that you keep that in mind. So the Oedipus complex happened between 3 to 6 years, and the Electra complex too. The girl feels like a romantic feeling towards her father. It's like she feels angry with her mom, and she feels more lovely with her dad. It's weird, but this happens between those ages, 3 to 6 years. In the male happens the Oedipus complex, in the female the Electra complex. Okay, now the latency, and this stage is between the 6 and 12 years. This period with no development events, the preference for same-sex relation. In this period of time, the kids prefer to play with, for example, the boys prefer to play only with the boys. Girls prefer to have relations and games with only the girls. Okay, the latency stage, there are no sexual developmental events. Now, the genital stage, this begins at the puberty, the maturation of the reproductive organs and the reproduction of sex hormones, the genitals, major source of sexual tension, feelings for the opposite sex area, source of anxiety, preparation for selecting a mate. The genital stage is the one in which the sexual organs are more developed. This is the moment when the teenager starts to feel like attraction for other girls. The in the case of the boy, feel attracted for girls. The girls start to feel attracted for other boys, and well, in the case of heterosexual relations, right? In that attraction happens a lot in that period, and you feel like you are in love forever, but it's just a stage. It's only a psychological stage. Okay, now I'm going to finish with the paraphilias and the sexual disorders. The sexual disorders that I was speaking about them. I spoke about the necrophilia, for example. That is the attraction for dead corpses, the sexual attraction for dead corpses. I spoke about the bestialism, that is the sexual attraction for animals. Now, there are other sexual disorders. The exhibitionism, that is the when the individual exposes his or her genitals to a stranger. It's like the person feels sexual pleasure for showing her or his sexual organs to other people, to strangers. Fetishism is when the individual uses a non-living object, like the woman's high-heeled shoe, stockings, in a sexual manner. Fetishism is when a person feel a sexual pleasure on using objects during the sexual intercourse. Then the frotteurism, The individual touches or rubs against a non-consenting person in a sexual manner. The frotteurism is when a person feels sexual pleasure when it's in contact, rubbing with another person without the consentment of that person. Okay? For that reason, it's a sexual disorder. All these are sexual disorders. The pedophilia that is very common, and I'm sure that you understand the word, but I'm going to explain it. Either the intense sexually arousing fantasies, orgies, or behaviors involving sexual activity with a prepubescent child, typically age 13 or younger. That's pedophilia. The transvestic fetishism, it's a sexual interest or desire to dress in clothes of the opposite sex. It's more common for men to have this disorder than women. The transvestic fetishism is when a man, for example, feels good and he feels a sexual attraction on using uh, clothes of women. For example, stockings, high heels, or even the underwear. But it can happen not only in men, it can happen in women. Okay, then the voyeurism. The individual observes stranger who is naked or engaging in sexual activity. The voyeurism is the sexual pleasure on watching another person naked or another group of people having sexual relations. Okay, and about the regulation of sex hormones, remember always in the female the hypothalamus is in charge of the regulation of the sexual hormones with the pituitary gland. And then the hormones are estrogen and progesterone, the ones that are in more amount, in a bigger amount in the female body. They have testosterone, but in lower amounts. In the case of male, same thing. We have estrogens in our body, but in less quantity. The hypothalamus controls the pituitary gland, and then the testicles. In the testicles, we have the testosterone. That is the one that gives us as male the characteristics of male, the loud voice, a lot of hair, facial hair, uh, the strength in the muscles, and other between other characteristics, the production of seminal liquid. In the case of female, the estrogen and the progesterone are the ones that help in the development of breasts, the hips, between other different things and that are in their bodies. So today we saw a summary of a lot of different things that maybe they weren't in the book, because in the book we saw different things about the pregnancy, contraceptive methods, pregnancy in teenagers. But I saw that in the book they didn't explain the paraphilies, the sexual disorders, and they didn't explain the sexual attractions and the genders. So I tried to give you an overview about that. Let me tell you that there's a lot of information. Oof, a lot of different information. There's a lot of information, but you can investigate more about that. You cannot just stop in this. I will leave in Google Classroom the link to the slideshow that I was using here so you can check it. And please remember to comment in YouTube your question, and I'm going to answer it over there. I'm going to use a different method. This time, don't write your question in Google Classroom or in WhatsApp. Write it over there in YouTube, in the comment area below of this video, and I'm going to answer it, okay? So thanks for your attention, and I hope that you can have a nice time in family. Now I have to say bye.